What is the right diving equipment? Which is the best training agency? And who is the most experienced instructor? All are fun and potentially interesting discussion topics, and definitely more exciting than the one thing that actually matters most in surviving technical dives: discipline. Let's discuss how discipline beats any other metric in today's episode of the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast. I'm your host, instructor trainer and underwater filmmaker Nick de Rooder. Welcome back everybody to episode number 5 of the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast. Today we are talking about why discipline beats talent and every other metric in technical diving, and why this matters even more when you bring cameras, when you go to wrecks, caves and into decompression. In this episode I want to break down what discipline actually looks like underwater, and we will discuss regular training, team optimization, pre-dive safety checks, physical fitness, the pre-dive mental clarity, and how to enforce your own limits. And I know that sounds a little bit boring and perhaps a little bit preachy, but this really is the result of 15 years of training instructors and training technical divers. So let's get into it. This episode is supported by DSG&x Singapore Ocean Week, the largest scuba diving trade show in Asia. This year's 2026 edition takes place from April 10 to 12 at Suntec in Singapore. I will be attending myself and I will be presenting there. If you're a diver or a diving professional in Asia Pacific region, you should definitely consider attending. I will put a link in the description and perhaps we can meet up there and have a little chat. It may sound a little obvious to start this episode with talking about regular training, but I really can't stress this enough. It's something that I swear by for myself. I take at least one course every year, not only to be in that student seat and to realize that, yes, learning scuba diving can be stressful. It makes me better as an instructor, but also because I really do believe in just repeated practice and building muscle memory that does fade over time. And sometimes I'll even take a course a second time from a different instructor or in a different training agency just to see the differences. Different instructors simply also have different things to offer. This is a form of discipline. I think once you have learned something, it is easy to assume that you can simply keep doing that thing from here onwards. But of course, knowledge and skill fades over time, and you may also simply start remembering things incorrectly. I've caught myself doing things over and over and over again, only for me to slightly change the way I do things without realizing it, and then when I get back to an instructor, be called out for actually doing something a little bit incorrectly. Luckily, there are courses that have a lot of overlap. So of course, in the technical courses, whether it's Tech 40, 45, 50 or advanced nitrox decompression procedures and so forth, there can be a lot of overlap and a lot of recall that is required, which is great, of course. If you're forced to dig into your memory and forced to dig into your skill set and try to re-practice things that you already know, that's obviously very useful. Again, you may be misremembering things, and so having an instructor there to call you out on that, because they, assuming they teach regularly, should obviously be more on top of that. That is absolute gold. Also, not every instructor is great. It's perfectly possible that you've received a course from somebody who was less than stellar and you wouldn't know. Often you simply do not know what you're not being taught that you're supposed to be taught. And so picking different instructors, even picking different agencies is great, of course, especially because learning different techniques gives you different tool sets for different situations. I also think that there is no problem with backtracking a little bit. I see that a lot in the cave courses, for instance. You have cavern, intro to cave, full cave, but different agencies will slice those up a little bit differently. And especially in that type of environment, duplicate training is great. Doing those skills over and over, even when you think you already know them. I don't know how many blind exits I've done in my life, but it's a lot. And it's fun. I think if you like being pushed and if you like being challenged, it can be a lot of fun, and it only strengthens your recall and your muscle memory for when things do perhaps actually go wrong. It's also worth considering training in different locations if you can. We have a saying, train hard and dive easy. So training in an environment that, for instance, is a lot colder or a lot murkier or has a lot stronger currents, where you are perhaps required to wear a dry suit and dry gloves and thick hoods. Yes, that's of course a lot harder. But if you're able to achieve satisfactory performance in those types of conditions, then I think you should certainly feel the confidence to do it in conditions that are better. Train hard and dive easy, I think, also pertains to be realistic in your training. I sometimes get students, for instance, who swear by, let's say, using their surface marker buoy as a backup buoyancy device. And that's fine. Of course, people do that. And if you have a reasonably sized and properly outfitted surface marker buoy, you can do that. But of course, the rule is then that's what you're going to use in training. So don't dive with backup devices that you've never actually proved out. Again, train hard and then dive easy. Another perhaps training related technique that I do swear by is video training, and you can actually use that for yourself. And I don't mean training by watching a video, although of course seeing skills done first as a premeditative step can be useful. But when I say video training, I very much mean have yourself be filmed while performing your skill practice and review that afterwards. Some instructors will use that during the course, during training, if safety permits, which I think is a great teaching technique. I'll sometimes use it if it's appropriate, but you can also, after training, do that for yourself. Yeah, get a camera. It doesn't have to be an expensive camera. I actually like using a smartphone in an underwater housing for that because of the big screen. So it's easy to even review underwater right away. But set it up or have your buddy hold it, and you can do this in a pool or in shallow water and run through your skills practice. It's a great way to analyze your skill performance, to see how fluent it is, to see if you have any hiccups anywhere. But it's also a great way to analyze your equipment configuration. So do regular 360-degree helicopter turns and see if everything is in place the way you want it to be. One thing that I'll do, for instance, and I think that's a great little pro tip as well, is I keep a list in my phone of different equipment configurations and then different weights for different setups. So for instance, if I'm diving back-mounted doubles 2x S80 aluminum and I'm wearing a dry suit with thick undergarments, how much weight do I need? Which fins do I wear with that? If I'm wearing the KISS Sidewinder rebreather and I'm wearing maybe a dry suit but with just a thin base layer, not much thermal protection, how much weight do I need and how is that weight distributed? Freshwater, saltwater, and so on. If you keep a list like that, and again, you do regular video training, look at your trim in the water, do a 360, see how your skill performance goes on those different setups. Keep a list, and then whenever you travel and you dive in a comparable environment, it is very easy to just pull up that list and without guessing too much, I can almost immediately, without guessing, say how much weight I need, and then just use that as a starting point. And I find that really, really useful. Even in different environments, I will do regular video retraining for myself. Right now, I'm in Thailand, for instance, and I did it literally yesterday again. Just went off in the ocean with the Sidewinder and just looked in preparation for the upcoming cave and mine dives, what I look like, whether my trim is up to snuff, and so forth. And again, that relates to discipline, not just assuming that your weight from your last dive is going to be the correct weight for this dive, not assuming that in a different environment you can just kind of get in the water and start diving. is huge, and it does take time and it does take effort to get in the water, set up that camera, review afterwards. These aren't necessarily the most fun dives, but you gain a lot of new information from that. And again, if you then make sure to note down that information and keep it for future reference, this type of discipline is great for your personal library building, right? You build up a lot of information for future dives. Team optimization, so briefings, debriefings, and in-dive communication, I think is one of the highest forms of diving discipline there is. Nothing beats a solid dive team that communicates clearly. The people that I dive with regularly, I pretty much just need to look at them, and just by the slightest movement, I can assess their state of mind, and I know what they're going to say. Of course, you don't always have the luxury of diving with the same people. You may not have a local dive team that you are in sync with, but even more so than clear team communication and proper pre-dive briefing is so incredibly important. Diving can have a very high plug and play culture in some cases, which I don't really like. I don't think diving is plug and play, especially with people you haven't dived with before. Even going as far as running through emergency drills with people that I haven't dived with before. And I've had that before, that people weren't really up for that. They didn't really want to do that, which automatically, in my eyes, disqualifies them a bit for a dive with me. Not because I think I'm so great, but because I would love to know that my teammates, whether I've dived with them before or not, I would like to know how they do things. I would like to know that they remember how to react in certain stressful situations. And also, I do think that it speaks to a certain humility to be willing to run through those emergency drills in a pre-dive briefing. It also takes away any form of improvisation. When something goes wrong, the more muscle memory you have, the more recall you have and know what to do, the more likely you're going to be able to handle that situation safely and in a timely, controlled manner. This also goes for simply briefing the dive plan. I don't know about you, but I personally do not love dives that are a bit improvised on the spot. I like to know where are we going, how long, how deep, what are the navigational decisions we're going to make. Let's make those ahead of time so that we can eliminate all improvisation. If you have too much improvisation in a dive, there's just a really high chance that some divers are going to be taking the lead and some divers are going to end up in the passenger seat. And especially when it comes to technical diving, I don't think anybody should be in a passenger seat. Obviously, everybody should be able to drive that bus. And that's simply not possible if you're not willing to do a thorough dive plan briefing. I would even go as far as doing a complete mental rehearsal of every step of the dive. Maybe that's a little bit too intense, but again, especially if it's a team that you do not know well, seeing how people talk through things and seeing how willing they are to talk through things can tell you a lot about their skill level, their experience level, and their mental state of mind. But it also enables you to bond a little bit before the dive, which I think is not unimportant, especially when shit could hit the fan. On film dives, this is even more important, and we've talked about this in our episode 2 about technical dives in Malta, where we were filming during some complex technical dives. And in those dives even more so. In some dives we literally go down to the minute. We make a list of to the minute into the dive where people need to be, what is expected of them. Especially if we have a larger team, if we're in the overhead, if there are models, if there are people holding lights, it can be really useful to write down to the minute where everybody should be. Because time is simply a luxury that we do not have. And again, it's intensely satisfying to dive with a team and knowing of that team that they are able to execute a plan like that to a T. It's very satisfying, and it is great for team building afterwards when everybody involved can acknowledge that it went off exactly as it was planned. I know that maybe seems a little bit boring when I talk about it like this, but it's actually intensely satisfying. Pre-dive checks are, of course, I think in every training curriculum, something that is heralded as the end-all be-all of diving discipline. But again, as I mentioned earlier, too often diving, and especially recreational diving, is treated as a plug-and-play activity. People set up their equipment, which basically means connect a first stage to a cylinder, a BCD to a cylinder, and connect the regulator to the BCD, and we're good to go. That's obviously not great. So I think paying attention during equipment setup obviously prevents unforeseeable errors. And it can stop a cascading of failures, right? Again, as I said in the introduction, most problems kind of start quietly. They usually start during an equipment setup where something goes a little bit unnoticed or a little bit ignored. Personally, and I will come back on this later, but I like a moment of total silence and total discipline during equipment setup, just so that you can be fully mentally present. You should not be chit-chatting, talking, joking, music playing, what have you. I think it makes perfect sense to do this with the utmost focus so that you know that your life support system is 100% functional. Use checklists if you must, right? Especially if you're diving with more complicated gear. And I think in rebreather diving, this is more commonplace to have a checklist, whether it be in paper or on your phone or laminated or something, but have a checklist that you physically tick off every step has been done. Take photographs of your equipment. I do this a lot of my setup. I'll just take a quick picture without me in it, just for me to afterwards, remember how I did things. But also, should something go wrong, that there is some proof, or if it's maybe equipment that I don't dive with a lot, so that I have something to go back to. I spoke about note-taking earlier in regards to weight distribution for trim and whatnot in different setups. And again, taking pictures of the different setups, it's just something that I like doing. It's now not that I go back to those photos all the time, but I do find it incredibly useful to have them. Once you are fully geared up, sit in your equipment. This is another thing that I really require of my students, and I know most people kind of hate it a little bit, especially when it's hot out and we're out on the boat or whatever. But I want people to fully gear up. Doesn't matter the type of dive we're doing, doesn't matter if there is 3-4 deco cylinder, add it all onto your person and sit with it. Sit with it and empty your mind and run through the full setup in your mind. So basically do almost a gear check on yourself after you're fully geared up. You'll be surprised how many problems you can actually catch on yourself when you operate like that. But also it brings you in a mental space where you're now fully focused on the dive. It's not uncommon, for instance, during technical dives, and if we're maybe on a boat with other people, of course, when the equipment starts being put on and when the deco cylinders start being added on, that's where it starts looking, maybe for a lack of a better word, that's where it starts looking impressive a little bit. And that's where bystanders may feel the urge to ask, how deep are you going? What is in this deco cylinder, etc. And that's understandable, that's the moment that triggers the most questions. But that also happens to be the moment that is most deserving of focus and focus on the mission. Right? So I think there is nothing wrong, if done in a respectful way, with asking for a moment of reflection and a moment of silence and self-assessment. So I usually make students sit in the equipment for 10-15 minutes. You're not gonna overheat, and if you do, cool yourself down, pour some water over you, sit in the shade, but make sure that you can create a space to make that happen immediately after gearing up. I think is very important. Same thing after the dive, right? Usually, I don't know about you, but I definitely during most dives notice maybe something that I think is suboptimal, something that I would like to modify, a deering that isn't exactly in the spot that I wanted it. And so doing immediately after the dive, making that change and then tidying up your equipment, I think is so useful. I get it. After a long dive, you just want to gear down, get out of your wetsuit, dry suit, whatever. You want to drink some water. Super important. But I think before you start, sort of going back to the real world, take 5 minutes to make the small adjustment that you wanted to make, or you will almost certainly forget it. Then tidy up your equipment. You'll be surprised just how beneficial that is for the next dive. And at the end of the day, since we are talking about equipment and pre-dive equipment checks, something that I do like reminding people of is, of course, that there is no equipment solution for a skill problem. It is important to differentiate between whether something didn't go well because there is actually an acute equipment-related issue, or whether something didn't go well because maybe you do not have the skill set to execute it properly. It's not uncommon for people to blame diving equipment, or maybe they don't have the exact right fins because these fins are slightly more negative than those fins. Again, I'm all for gear optimization, but there is no equipment solution for a skill problem. So be careful that you do not focus on the wrong equipment solution when in reality it is a skill problem. Perhaps the most confronting and least comfortable part of the discipline discussion, I think, is in the space of the physical fitness. And I certainly don't want to be body shaming, etc., but at the same time, I think it's important to just have a honest discussion about that. I'm fiercely anti-smoking. I think definitely before and after a dive, I find it a bit crazy. It's well understood that this impairs your body's oxygen delivery mechanisms. It's well understood that this impairs your body carbon dioxide tolerance. It's well understood that this greatly impairs your body's circulation. So if you are a smoker, I think, okay, so be it, but consider maybe having a window of several hours before and several hours after the dive where you simply do not smoke. I think it makes perfect sense. This is science, it's not really an opinion. At the risk of sounding a little bit preachy, but just consider quitting, right? Drinking alcohol is another one that is in that same vein. It's well understood and well documented that alcohol, of course, causes dehydration, that it greatly reduces sleep quality as well, that it impairs your judgment. So I'm not really a big drinker in general, so it's a little easier for me to say that, but definitely the day before a technical dive, you will not catch me drinking alcohol, mostly because I know it will dehydrate me and because I know it will mess with my sleep quality. And I know that sounds like a really minor thing, maybe, but you also have to keep in mind that all of these things add up. All these forms of discipline do add up into one larger package that, of course, makes you less accident prone. So again, if you enjoy the occasional glass of wine, just like I do, I don't think there's a problem with that. But if I know I'm doing a trimix dive tomorrow, if I know I'm doing a complicated cave video shoot tomorrow, then you will certainly not catch me drinking. At the end of the day, it's also just a form of discipline to choose a little bit between different fun things, right? You might find it very enjoyable to drink a couple glasses, but you might also find it enjoyable to go and do that cave dive. And so maybe you don't need to have your cake and eat it. Maybe you can just pick one. And in general, having reasonable fitness, right? So I think it's again well understood that doing regular cardio, though not immediately before or after a dive, but doing regular cardio and making sure that your circulation is optimal is good for you. Yeah, especially during dives where you might expect a higher workload, it's going to make you much more able to deal with that. Yeah, think currents, think difficult climbs up and down into the water. It's of course also going to reduce your gas consumption. So if you dive on open circuit, it's going to definitely give you a little bit more time in the water. And your stress response, your ability to deal with unexpected situations. I find this a very interesting statement by Patrick Whitman, who said, I do not just stay in good shape because of the direct effect it has on diving. But he's of course very big into exploration. He says, I do it because I know I constantly put myself in situations where help is not near. So even if during an exploration, if I fall with my equipment on, or if I get stuck somewhere and I cannot immediately get evacuated, being in reasonably good physical condition is probably going to increase my survivability significantly. And that might be the difference between living or dying when help is not close. So depending again on where you dive and how close or far you are to emergency medical support systems, there is a real argument to be made for being just in reasonably good physical fitness. I know that sounded really preachy, but I think we need as divers to be able to have those conversations and to be honest with ourselves and each other. The same thing goes for mental clarity, I think, especially pre-dive and of course during the dive, mental clarity. A big thing that I see with students is I need to tell them at some point, put the phone away, right? Whether that's during briefings, during equipment setup, but also just in general, we're about to go and do this somewhat complex dive. This is not the moment to invite other impulses into your world, right? This dive requires all your attention, all your focus. This is not the moment to start inviting other problems or other distractions. I mentioned earlier that I like to gear up and do this with my students as well. Gear up 10-15 minutes before the dive and sit with it. I sometimes seclude myself even, although of course team briefings, etc. is very important, but that should be done, in my opinion, before we gear up. Then isolate yourself a little bit. Yeah, I think that your ability to calm yourself completely from any other worldly distractions and solely focus on the dive plan probably is one of the greatest forms of discipline and probably greatly enhances the dive survivability. You can of course practice meditation in regular daily life. I think there are great apps to do that. I don't think everybody needs to be a Buddhist monk and be completely Zen, but again, not needing to be distracted all the time and simply being able to calm your mind and focus on the here and the now is an incredibly powerful tool. People who dive with me do know that as well. I'm usually the first one to gear up. I'm hyper focused on that, so I tend to just simply be ready first, and I tend to isolate myself for 5 minutes, usually in the water if I can, if the environment allows it. I think going in the environment and in the element puts me in my element, so to speak, and makes me fully ready for the dive. And there is nothing better than like 5 to 10 minutes of team silence and focus before we go and do the thing. Lastly, discipline is all about limiting yourself. We are, of course, in a sport and in a type of diving, especially in technical diving, where we are often chasing a little bit those limits, and maybe even, if we can admit it, chasing the thrill a little bit of getting close to those limits. But diving more conservative than your training levels is in my opinion, the most disciplined thing you can do. It's a very, very prudent thing to do, obviously. And it'll be annoying to the people I dive with, but I'll be the first to turn almost any dive, especially overhead dives. I turn them almost to a fault, a little bit annoyingly early. But again, I'm a big believer in stacking the odds in my favor. So yes, diving is a reasonably safe sport, but accidents do happen. And of course, when accidents happen, and especially in technical diving, so deco diving, overhead, and so on, when something happens, the potential for a deadly incident is quite high. And so I'm okay with doing that. I can take peace, or I can make peace with the fact that I'm doing that, if I can also stack the odds in my favor. And so I think that means everything that we've just mentioned combined. So take regular training, do regularly refresh your skills and learn different ways of handling problems. Don't drink, don't smoke, work out regularly, sleep a lot, stay hydrated, meditate if you can, make clear dive plans, keep those equipment notes, make sure you're always diving somewhat close to your optimal configuration for that equipment. Observe yourself, like in video debriefs. Don't be too easy on yourself, and be conservative. If you add all those things up, yes, they might be minor in and of themselves, but if you add them all up, then statistically you're simply putting yourself in a much safer spot than if you don't do any of those things. Does that mean that you're completely safe? Does that mean that you have absolutely no chance of getting hurt? Of course not. I think at the end of the day, you do need to make a mental contract with yourself and agreeing that these are potentially deadly activities, and you do need to be okay with that. But I think even acknowledging that is quite powerful. There's a lot of people who will say cave diving is not dangerous, technical diving is not dangerous if you know what you're doing. And I know where they're coming from and I know what they mean, but this is a hill I'm willing to die on. I will keep calling it dangerous activities for the rest of my life, because as long as I can call them dangerous activities, it means that I acknowledge for myself that there is a heightened risk, there is a higher level of danger. And as long as I keep acknowledging that to myself, I will keep applying the discipline and all the aforementioned procedures to try and keep myself out of harm's way. So hopefully you found a little nugget in here, something that you aren't doing yet or that you might want to start doing. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have forms of diving or pre-diving discipline that you would like to share with us, or that we could add to the list. I would also like to thank ADEX Singapore Ocean Week for supporting this episode. Remember that in April 10 to 12 at Suntec in Singapore, you can visit ADEX Ocean Week, and I will be attending and presenting as well. I would love to see you there, and we can even have a little chat. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next time. Stay safe.